Recently, Dr. Jordan Peterson resurfaced after dipping out of public life due to serious health issues. Naturally, a lot of people had questions about what had happened to him, so he and his daughter took up the Times' offer to have a sit-down so they could help Jordan Peterson set the record straight and share his rough health journey. But when the article came out, well, it wasn't what Jordan Peterson was expecting. Instead, to him and his daughter, it felt like a betrayal, since the Times article made all sorts of insinuations and wondered if toxic masculinity was the cause of his health issues. So what's been going on with Jordan Peterson for the last few years? To explain this, I will be using clips from the 3-hour sit-down with a reporter from the Times Decca Aitkenhead and Jordan Peterson and Mikhaila Peterson. Unfortunately, it is audio only. Peterson has suffered from depression for many years, and it's a common affliction in his family. He's been taking medication for it for a while, but for the last few years, his depression has worsened since he's been under public pressure, but especially so when his wife Tammy received a rare cancer diagnosis with a 1-year 100% fatality rate. Peterson's doctors increased his medication to help him, but his depression only got worse. And while Tammy miraculously survived and recovered after undergoing some complications and surgery, Peterson got worse. Here he is explaining to Decca.
I developed this condition called akathisia, which I didn't know about at the point.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and let me tell you, you wouldn't wish that on. It's unbearable, to say the least. And they say with akathisia, people are driven to suicidality within an hour of the onset of the symptoms. I had akathisia for 800 hours, 900 hours. 1,000 hours, sometimes 7 hours a day.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
What did it feel like, Dr. Peterson?
Well, imagine, I just figured this out, a way to communicate it to some degree properly in the last couple of days. So imagine that someone jabbed you really hard in the ribs with their fingers and stiff fingers. You'd pull away and then there'd be a spasm from that and you'd move. Well, then imagine that that's happening 50 times and every time you breathe. That's sort of what it's like.
Now, turns out akathisia is not really well known and very difficult to treat because they have to get the medication that caused the affliction out of your system, but that can be unbearable to go through. Here's Jordan explaining the experience at a clinic in America.
Yeah.
And I went to the treatment clinic on the Eastern Seaboard, and they had promised essentially a 12-week treatment program. And my impression of that was that at the end of that 12-week period, I would be free of benzodiazepines. Mm-hmm. But that isn't how it worked out at all. And I was on more medication when I left that treatment center than I was when I went in.
Were you angry with them? Were you arguing with them?
No.
Why not?
There was no point in being angry. It wouldn't be helpful. I was disappointed. I mean, when I went there to begin with, right at admission, they basically told me that the 12-week program was unlikely to be successful. And I thought, well, this is a hell of a time to be informing me of that since I've just come down from Toronto. But by that time there wasn't any alternatives at that point.
So the doctor prescribed treatments weren't working for Peterson, and he was only getting worse, and his situation was now dire. Now, where does his daughter fall into all of this? Well, since Tammy was still recovering from her major health issues, it was Mikhaila, Jordan Peterson's daughter, who took the reins in making sure her father got the treatment he needed. Here's something that Jordan Peterson says often. Aim to be the most useful person at your father's funeral, meaning build yourself up so you can deal with one of the most difficult situations that life is going to throw at you. Well, his daughter did one better. She proved to be the most useful person while her father was dying. One of the important efforts she made during her father's health issues was to research as much as possible and not just accept what the doctors were prescribing. Since akathisia is not well understood, the doctors kept misdiagnosing it as schizophrenia. Here is Mikhaila explaining the ordeal.
So he was hospitalized here in a public hospital, and they diagnosed him with schizophrenia and doubled some of the medications. And so my family was there, and at this point, my grandparents had flown over, my uncle had flown over, and we were going, the medications are making him sick. Get him off of them. How do we get him off of them? And the hospital here said, it's schizophrenia. We should do ECT. ECT.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he's there.
So their entire position is that he has a psychiatric condition that they need to treat with drugs. Your entire position is he has had psychiatric side effects from being given drugs he should not be on.
Yeah.
And the solution is to get him off the drugs, not to be giving him. But you're at total cross purposes at that point,
really,
the medical establishment.
It was so bad. And that, like, I can remember one of the conversations we had with this psychiatrist, he goes, well, we think it's schizophrenia. And I was like, these symptoms didn't even start until he started the medications, okay? So you're telling me like a mid-50-year-old man with no previous symptoms of schizophrenia suddenly gets schizophrenia, which doesn't generally, it generally happens late teens for men. It's not like we're uneducated in these things, right? I was like, what? How about you remove the meds and just see if it's a side effect, given the fact it could be. And they wouldn't listen to us.
Mikhaila refused to accept ECT as the treatment for a misdiagnosis of schizophrenia. Her main goal was to get her father off of the medication. After calling all the detox treatment clinics around the world, Mikhaila found the only one who felt confident about detoxing Peterson without putting him on more medication and making his akathisia worse. Now, that clinic was in, Russia.
I mean, obviously, what lots of people would say is, why this is obviously I've talked to various people about this, and everyone says, why on earth would a high-profile North American?
I went to the best treatment clinic in North America in Connecticut, and all they did was make it worse. We were out of options. We were out of options. The judgment of my family was that I was likely going to die in Toronto. And so there was no.
Die in Toronto. Again, I mean, lots of people would say, why would you sort of trust the judgment? Although your family members love you, they're not trained, qualified medics. Why would you put yourself in their hands and not the medical profession's hands?
I had put myself in the hands of the medical profession. And the consequence of that was that I was going to die. And we put ourselves in the hands of medical professionals in Russia too. So it wasn't like we were completely fleeing from the medical profession. I tried a slow taper on the benzodiazepines and I couldn't do it.
Despite her own health issues, a language barrier, and contracting COVID herself, Mikhaila succeeded in pulling her father through. After plenty of complications, the Russian clinic was able to help him detox. Even though his akathisia was still prevalent, Peterson was on the path to recovery. Today, Peterson is free of akathisia, thank God. And it's clear that this has been a very difficult time for the family, for Mikhaila, but especially for Jordan Peterson. To experience such discomfort and pain for such a prolonged period and still pull through without becoming intensely angry is incredible.
I mean, obviously, look, the obvious thing that critics, your enemies would say, I'm sure this is hardly going to be news to you, would be, hold on a minute, your entire intellectual framework, your philosophy of life is that life is about suffering, about pain, and that the manly, strong, dignified thing to do is to accept that pain and suffering and battle through it and learn from it, and that the coward's way out is to try and take drugs No,
I've never said that. I've never said that. And as a clinician, I mean, I've had many people in my practice. Look, if you're a viable clinician, you encourage people to take psychiatric medication when it's appropriate. And many people in my practice were helped to a tremendous degree by antidepressants. I was. They were unbelievably helpful to me and to other members of my family. Not universally and not without a cost, but very, very helpful. And, that's a caricatured viewpoint too. What I really encourage people to, what I encourage in people is it isn't useful to allow your suffering to make you resentful, even though you have reason for that. And so part of the battle, people are hurt badly by their lives in all sorts of ways, and becoming bitter and resentful about that means that you start to cause extra suffering in yourself and in your family members and in your community, and that's not helpful. It's not helpful. And believe me, I mean, I've had plenty of temptation to become resentful about what's happened to me in the last 2 years with my wife's terrible illness and, well, with my daughter's illness, first of all, and then with my wife's illness and then with mine, and I've certainly had my moments where I thought it was torturous, because it was unbelievably torturous, because I was in agony and with an indeterminate prognosis, but certainly one that indicated that this would last for months and months and only slowly recede, months and months and perhaps years. I was shut off from my family, except for much of this time, and among strangers who didn't speak my language. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I had this plethora of opportunities sitting in front of me, none of which I was able to access. Like, I love my wife and my kids and my grandkids, and it was like a nightmarish surrealist novel. I had all this waiting for me, all this life I put together so carefully, and it was constantly dangled out of my reach. I was completely consciously aware of that. The condition I developed made it impossible for me to live at home. So I was divorced from my profession, from all the things that I was working on, and from everybody that I loved. I had plenty of reason to become, like many people do, to become bitter. It's not helpful.
When I watched the podcast that you did with Mikhaila, I thought you looked angry at moments, and I was wondering who or what you were angry with.
Well, pain will make you angry.
Right.
Decca's line of questioning during the interview is very interesting because the article was pitched to the Petersons in a very friendly, sympathetic way. Here's Mikhaila reading snippets from that email.
We've been following his story closely over the past weeks and hoping that he's doing better. It's such an exhausting, uncompromising virus. This was sent in August after we had COVID. It must be an incredibly stressful period for you all. When the time feels right, we would love to send one of our writers to speak with him for the magazine. The interview would cover his life and career to date, family life, illness, recovery, and upcoming plans and projects for the future. It would allow you to clear up any factual inaccuracies that might have been reported in the press, telling his side of the story, as well as celebrating his life and career so far.
Very reasonable and very polite. But you have to start wondering about the reporter's angle a little bit when she kept asking questions like, did that make you angry? In fact, I counted 5 different times that Decca asked if Peterson was angry. This example is the most surprising.
Is there anybody of you that's angry with yourself for taking benzodiazepines when now that you know how dangerous they are?
I wouldn't say angry. It's not like I failed to see the irony. And that was another thing about this that made it still continues to make it difficult to stomach. Should have I known better? Possibly.
Well,
I mean, I did do my thesis on alcoholism, although,
this is, hold up.
Yeah.
You had a side effect from a medication. Should you have known better that benzodiazepines can cause akathisia in people who take SSRIs?
No.
You didn't have it like this. This wasn't benzodiazepine dependency problem. This was an akathisia side effect from psych meds.
Right.
So let's
yes, and no, I couldn't have known that. Yes, that's right.
I like that Mikhaila jumped in to defend her father because it is a ridiculous question to ask. But after reading the article that the Times published, I now see why Decca was so insistent on this question. The article is not kind to the Petersons. The writers openly wonder if the root cause of Jordan Peterson's health issues is toxic masculinity. They compared him to Donald Trump, saying parallels with Donald Trump come to mind. Another unhappy man closed off from his emotions, projecting strongman mythology while hunkered down in a bunker with his family against the world. I would like to mention that the writers said this despite listening to Jordan Peterson breaking down on the call.
Part of what's overwhelming to me is how it's direct evidence for how little encouragement so many people get. They're starving. Sorry. I haven't done an interview for a long time.
Fine, take as long as you need. Of course.
The article goes on to call the entire health ordeal a circus and wonder what sort of people they are if their judgment is so flawed to go all the way to Russia for a solution against their doctor's recommendations. They call out Mikhaila for her appearance and compare her to a Trump press spokeswoman and ask the question why Jordan Peterson let himself play into the circus that was orchestrated by Mikhaila Peterson. I'm paraphrasing here, but I highly recommend you go and read the article in full. It's linked in the description below. To me, it's clear that the Times strategy was to go to the Petersons as friends, but use this as a platform to discredit Peterson and make him seem like a toxic man with flawed judgment that no one should listen to. But many people don't see him like that. In fact, many people around the world see him as an intelligent, empathetic, reasonable man who has clearly suffered so deeply and wants to help others survive their own suffering. Looking through the comments section of his videos, I can see so many people talking about how Peterson's lectures have changed their lives, and in some cases saved them from suicide. Many people come up to Peterson after his talks to tell him just that.
So all these people line up and, they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have, 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable.
As controversial as the press makes Peterson sound, as I see it, he really isn't. His entire messaging is around learning how to bear the burdens in your life and create a more meaningful existence for yourself. And it's working. People are responding with incredible positivity to this message. The Times article is not the first, nor will it be the last attempt from the traditional media to discredit Jordan Peterson. Lord knows he must be used to this by now, but I can't imagine how painful it must be to be vulnerable, to share the details of a difficult couple years with a reporter, hear her empathize with you on the call, and then see the words toxic masculinity in print soon after. I think there are plenty of reasons for why Decca Aitkenhead and the rest of her leftist traditional media friends don't like Jordan Peterson, and I'm happy to explore that in another detailed video if you want. But I want to end this already long video by drawing your attention to the Times' view on inner strength and willpower, because they end the article by taunting Peterson because he got through his terrible ordeal because of his, quote, willpower and courage, even though he said no such thing during the call and felt nothing but gratitude for his family for pulling him through this ordeal. While the Times said it in such a snide manner, I want to say it genuinely. I am amazed to hear a person go through such a difficult problem and come out of it still ready and willing to continue to help others. I really struggled to make this video because I felt so sad that a person could be so misrepresented and betrayed during an already troubling time. I don't think Decca and her fellow writers are bad people, but I do think that they're hell-bent on destroying the people on their list, and I guess to her and the staff over at the Times, all this is very toxic behavior. But after reading the article and listening to the interviews, I just feel very grateful that a man like Jordan Peterson exists. Well, what do you think of the article and the interview? I'm going to link all the materials down in the description in case you're interested in checking it out. Also, let me know in the comments if you're interested in a deep dive into why the far left really hates Jordan Peterson. I think that's a very complex answer, but I'm very excited to explore it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, share, and subscribe. And a big thank you to all my patrons. I really appreciate your support. Thank you. I'll see you next time.